This is you, 100 feet above the Sea of Japan, flying so low that the spray from the waves is visible through your cockpit glass. Behind you, the Soviet Union. Ahead of you, 400 miles of open water and a decision that cannot be undone. You are alone. No wingmen, no radio contact, no flight plan. Just you and the most secretive military aircraft on Earth, skimming the surface of the ocean at 500 miles per hour on a route you memorized from maps you studied in secret and then had to pretend you had never looked at. You have been planning this moment for 2 years. You have 40 minutes of fuel left. And somewhere ahead of you, Japanese radar operators are about to see something appear in their airspace that has no business being there. A Soviet military aircraft, moving fast, no flight plan, no communication, no explanation. They will have minutes to decide what it is: an accident, a provocation, an attack, and whether to shoot it down. Chuguyevka Air Base, Primorsky Krai. You are 29 years old. You're one of the best pilots in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, an elite branch, separate from the regular Air Force, trusted enough to fly the MiG-25, the Foxbat. The West first saw the MiG-25 in the skies over the Middle East. Israeli radar picks up an aircraft accelerating to Mach 3.2, more than 3 times the speed of sound, and climbing to 63,000 feet. Israeli fighters scramble. They cannot get anywhere near it. A few days later, they ambush one from below, firing missiles head-on from 30,000 feet underneath. By the time the missiles detonate, the MiG is already miles away, already gone. The Pentagon looks at these reports and looks at satellite photographs and puts together a picture of a Soviet fighter plane unlike anything the world has ever seen. Fast, massive, unstoppable. The Secretary of the United States Air Force calls it probably the best interceptor in production in the world today. Every U.S. aircraft design program in the 1970s is shaped around fear of this plane. The F-15 Eagle is built specifically to fight it. Nobody in the West has ever sat inside one. Nobody has measured a rivet. Nobody knows the truth. You know the truth. You know the MiG-25 is not a superfighter. It is a sprinter, screaming fast in a straight line, built from steel instead of titanium because steel was cheaper, guzzling fuel at a rate that leaves it short-ranged and fragile. You know that if a pilot pushes it past Mach 2.8, the engines begin eating themselves from the inside. You know the radar runs on vacuum tubes technology that was outdated before you were born. The West has been building its entire air strategy around a myth. And you are the only person outside the Soviet Union who can prove it. That knowledge, right now, is worth more than the plane itself. The base is a wreck. The barracks leak in winter. The equipment is outdated. Half the instruments on the training aircraft are unreliable. You have made suggestions, put them in writing, handed them to the right people, and every time, the political officer has looked at you the way a man looks at something stuck to the bottom of his boot. The political officer does not care about the instruments. The political officer cares about loyalty. At home in the evenings, the arguments have been getting worse. Ludmila sits across from you at the kitchen table and tells you what you already know.
I'm done. I'm taking Dmitry and going back to my parents in Magadan. You can have this base, this posting, this life. I don't want any of it.
You look at your son, 3 years old, dark-haired, just starting to talk in full sentences, playing on the floor between you.
And if I told you I wasn't staying either? That I've been thinking about leaving? Not just the base, all of it.
She looks at you.
Leaving for where?
Japan, and then America.
A long silence.
You'd be throwing everything away. Your career, your rank. They would call you a traitor.
They already call everything I say a mistake. I've been here long enough to know what this system does to people who think for themselves. I want to know if America is what they say it is. I want to find out for myself. And I want to take the one thing I have, the one thing they would never expect me to give away, and hand it to someone who will actually use it.
She doesn't answer. She gets up and takes Dmitry to bed. You lie awake and think about the maps, about the distance from here to Japan, about whether the MiG-25 has enough fuel to make it. September 6th, 1976. 6:45 a.m. You walk your son to kindergarten. He is wearing a red coat. He holds your hand the whole way. You don't tell him anything. You can't. You say goodbye at the gate the same way you always do. Then, you go to the base. The flight surgeon checks you before the mission. Standard procedure. He notices your blood pressure is elevated.
Feeling alright, Lieutenant?
Fine.
You say.
I was exercising this morning. It brings the pressure up.
He writes something on his clipboard and waves you through. Your hands are completely steady. The morning's training mission is routine. A formation flight with fellow pilots from the 513th Fighter Regiment practicing standard patrol patterns. Rockets will be fired. MiG-23s from other bases will be participating. Nobody is watching you any more carefully than usual. You are trusted. You are one of the good ones. You climb into the MiG-25. You run the pre-flight checklist. Engine start, instruments, radio. You have memorized the route to Japan from maps you studied weeks ago. No paper, nothing written down, just the shape of the coastline and the compass heading burned into your memory. Tucked alongside you in the cockpit, the MiG-25's pilot manual. You brought it because you expect to need it. Because on the other side of 400 miles of water, you plan to hand it to an American engineer and walk him through the aircraft page by page. Takeoff at 12:50. You fly the formation exactly as planned. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then you report engine problems, a routine malfunction, nothing to panic about, and you break away from the group. You push the nose down. 100 feet above the water. This is the only way. Fly low enough and Soviet radar looks right over you. Japanese radar does the same. You are invisible at this altitude, a gray blur moving just above the wave tops, trading safety for invisibility. Behind you, your squadron is on the radio.
Belenko, respond. Return to formation immediately. What is your status?
You yanked out your headset 20 miles back. You can't hear them anymore. Whatever they are saying, the answer is already somewhere behind you, getting smaller. You fly on memory, the compass heading, the time elapsed. Somewhere in your chest, something is loud and fast, but your hands are absolutely still on the controls. You have trained for this. Not this exactly, but the stillness. The ability to perform under conditions that would shut most people down. 40 minutes of open water, then 50. The fuel gauge moves in a direction you don't love. At 7:40, you pull back on the stick. The MiG-25 climbs through 1,000 feet, 5,000, 20,000. You level off and wait. 30 seconds later, Japanese radar picks you up. What happens next is controlled chaos on both sides. The Japanese scramble 2 F-4 Phantom fighters from the 302nd Tactical Fighter Squadron to intercept you. They are looking for a Soviet military jet that appeared without warning in their airspace. From their perspective, this is either a navigation error, a provocation, or the opening move of something much worse. Your radio is tuned to Soviet military frequencies. The Japanese are calling on theirs. You cannot hear them. They cannot reach you. The clouds swallow you. The F-4s search. They cannot find you. Now you have a different problem. The fuel gauge is not your friend. You had planned to land at Chitose, a military airbase, a controlled environment, a place with a runway long enough for the MiG-25. But Chitose is somewhere beneath the cloud cover, and your navigation has been running on memory guesswork for almost an hour, and you cannot find it. What you can find, dropping below the clouds, is a civilian airport, Hakodate. You circle it once. From the air, the runway looks far too short, nowhere near enough for a MiG-25 to stop, even with the drag parachute. You circle a second time, then a third. The fuel gauge settles the argument. On the way down, a Boeing 727 is taking off from the same runway. You see it at the last moment and pull wide close enough that it goes into the official record later as a near miss. You bank hard, reposition, and aim back toward the runway. Then, the MiG-25's tires hit the runway. The drag parachute deploys. The brakes go on. The aircraft screams and shudders and slows, but not enough. You blast through the end of the runway, through 790 feet of dirt and grass, and come to rest just short of a localizer antenna, with the nose of the most secretive military aircraft in the world pointed at a small cluster of Japanese motorists who have pulled over on the road to watch. They are taking photographs. You climb out onto the wing. You draw your pistol and fire 2 shots into the air. The photographers scatter. Then you put the weapon away and stand on the wing of your stolen plane and wait. It takes airport officials several minutes to drive from the terminal. When they arrive, you tell them, through gestures and the few words of Japanese you do not have, that you want to defect to the United States. They take you into custody. You are arrested for entering Japanese airspace without permission and carrying a firearm. You have never been happier in your life. The Soviets are contacted immediately. Their response is instantaneous and furious. Belenko was drugged, they say. He made a navigational error. The plane must be returned at once, and so must the pilot. Japan should understand the seriousness of this situation. Japan keeps both. On September 7th, you are moved to Tokyo. On September 8th, the United States grants you political asylum. On September 9th, a Soviet diplomat comes to your room and tries to persuade you to come home. He is polite. He sits down across from you and folds his hands and speaks carefully.
You have made a mistake, Victor. It happens. The party is willing to be understanding about this. Come home. You will be forgiven. Your family is asking for you.
You look at him for a moment.
No.
Your wife. Your son.
No.
He leaves. You never speak to a Soviet official again. On September 10th, you board a Northwest Airlines flight to the United States. You are carrying the MiG-25's pilot manual in a bag at your feet. What the Americans find when they take the MiG-25 apart changes everything. The aircraft is transported to Hyakuri Air Base in a U.S. Air Force Lockheed C-5 Galaxy, a cargo aircraft so large it can carry tanks, helicopters, and fighter jets fully intact inside its hold. One of the biggest planes ever built. It arrives under escort of F-4 Phantoms. American engineers and intelligence officers go over the MiG piece by piece for weeks. They measure every component, they pull the engines, they test the radar. What they find is not the superfighter the Pentagon has been afraid of for 15 years. The radar runs on vacuum tubes, technology from the 1940s, ancient by Western standards. The airframe is built from steel, not titanium, which makes it heavier and less maneuverable than anything the Americans feared. The fuel consumption is extraordinary. The MiG-25 can sprint to Mach 2.8, but it cannot sustain it, and it cannot go far. It is a missile with a cockpit, designed to intercept bombers flying in straight lines, not to dogfight anything. The Soviet Union's most feared interceptor turns out to be something very different from what the West imagined. Japan charges the Soviets $40,000 for shipping costs and the damage at Hakodate Airport. On November 15th, the MiG leaves Japan in 30 crates aboard a Soviet cargo ship. When Soviet technicians check the crates at the other end, 20 parts are missing, including the film from the onboard camera that recorded the entire flight. The Soviets demand $10 million in compensation. Nobody pays. In America, you become a different person. The CIA debriefs you for 5 months. You tell them everything: the MiG's capabilities, its weaknesses, Soviet air defense doctrine, pilot training, morale, command structure. You tell them that the Soviet pilots they have been afraid of are undertrained, flying aging equipment, supervised by political officers who care more about ideology than airmanship. President Gerald Ford grants you asylum. Later, Jimmy Carter signs a private bill making you a U.S. citizen. For your own safety, you change your surname to Schmidt. The KGB knows who you are. Soviet propaganda claims you were killed in a car accident, then that you were arrested, then executed, then that you came home. None of it is true. You are in America, working as an aeronautics consultant, building a new life from whatever materials are available. Back in the Soviet Union, Ludmila and your own mother appear together at a press conference in Moscow on September 28th. Both of them tearful. Both of them looking into the camera and asking you to come home. It is clear the Soviet state is speaking through them. You never contact Ludmila again. In 30 years, she will tell a journalist that she never once heard from you. Dmitry grows up without a father. For years, you will not even acknowledge to your American colleagues that you have a son in the Soviet Union. You marry Coral Garas, a music teacher from North Dakota. You build a home in Montana. And with her, you have 2 sons, Tom and Paul. You later divorce her as well. You keep a low profile. You do not give interviews. You move often. You are careful. The KGB knows who you are. But you are alive and you are free. You think about the red coat, about the gate at the kindergarten, about 100 feet above the sea, and your hands steady on the controls, and 400 miles of water between you and everything you had ever known.
I am the luckiest man alive.
You say. And you mean it. Viktor Belenko died in September 2023 at a retirement home in Illinois. He was 76 years old. His military ID and the knee-pad notebook he used to navigate across the Sea of Japan are on display at the CIA Museum in Washington, D.C. The MiG-25 he flew to Japan was reassembled in the Soviet Union and used as a training aid. It was never allowed to fly again. If you want to see more stories like this one, check out our last video about the North Korean prison guard who escaped with his prisoners. Click on it and we'll see you in the next one.